Welcome to the last Computer Science and Engineering Colloquium of the year 2016. In terms of Colloquia, it's been a great year. I want to introduce Shiri Azenkot, our speaker today. She's an assistant professor at the Jacobs Technion Cornell Institute at Cornell Tech. She's an affiliate faculty member of the Computer Science Department at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. She leads the Enhancing Ability Lab at Cornell Tech. Her research interests are in accessibility and interaction on new platforms. Her research is wide-ranging, from Perkinput, a Braille-based text input system for touchscreens, to Magic Touch, a technology for interacting with 3D printed graphics. She received her PhD from the University of Washington in CSE in 2014. And at the time, she was the winner of the graduate medal that year, which is given to one person who got their PhD and has great social impact of their work. And today, she's going to talk about a different topic, one that I'm really interested in hearing about. And she changed the title on me. So, supporting people with low vision with context-based visual cues. Shiri?
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be back here in this very scary room where I feel like you're sitting on top of me. And to tell you about some of the work that my students and I have been working on that I'm very excited about on supporting people with low vision in performing daily activities. So I'm going to tell you about a study that we did to understand low vision people and how they perform daily activities. And then I'm going to talk about an innovation, a new technology that we designed to address certain challenges that we uncovered. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is low vision? So a lot of you might be thinking, well, I need glasses. I can't see very well without my glasses. I have low vision. And actually, you don't. And most likely, you don't have low vision. So low vision is a visual impairment that cannot be fully corrected with glasses or contact lenses. So a person with low vision has some kind of impairment that impacts negatively their ability to perform daily activities, like reading, for example, and glasses or contacts won't be able to fully correct this impairment. And it turns out that most people who have a visual impairment have low vision. They're not completely blind. And low vision is very common. So according to the World Health Organization, in the world, there are 246 million people with low vision, and only 39 million people who are blind, who have little to no functional vision. So that means that all of these people here have some kind of functional vision that they likely use in their daily lives. On the other hand, if you go to our human-computer interaction conferences or accessibility conferences, you'll see that there are a whole lot of papers about visual impairments, but nearly all of them assume that the target population has little to no functional vision. So there's this huge disconnect between the research that's currently being done and the demographics. So let me show you a few examples of what it means to have low vision. And there are many different types of visual conditions that can affect the way a person perceives the world visually. And perception is very complicated. So these simulations are they just give you a very rough idea of what it means to have low vision. So don't take them literally. So let's say we have this nice little photo here of two boys holding two balls. So this is what somebody with typical vision would see. This is what somebody who has a cataract might see. So there's a general haze. The colors are a bit off. It's kind of blurred. This is what someone with age-related macular degeneration might see. So with macular degeneration, you lose your central vision, so it becomes very difficult to see faces, to see and recognize faces, which is why the faces are blurred out, and also to read. This is what someone with diabetic retinopathy might see. So there are these dark splotches across the field of view. And before I move on, actually, I'm curious. So how many people have heard about one of those conditions? Cataracts? Richard, of course you did. Age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy. How many people have heard of these? Yeah, so low vision is actually very common, and especially in older adults. So as the population is aging, more and more people are going to develop visual conditions that will lead to low vision. So it's a large and growing demographic, and it's really important for us to study it. So there are many tools that exist today that are designed for people with low vision. So here's one tool. It's a handheld magnifier. So how many people have seen a handheld magnifier in real life? Yeah, they're really common, right? You can go to the drugstore and buy one for a couple of dollars. What's this? I heard someone mumbling. Yes, good, a monocular. So a monocular, again, it's a tool that magnifies something, but it magnifies something at a distance, something that's far away. So this is another tool that's a low-tech tool for people with low vision. Here is another tool. What's going on here? What is this? Yeah, screen magnifier. Excellent. So this is a screen magnifier. It's software that's built onto, in this case, iOS, an iPhone, and it magnifies a portion of the screen. So this square area right here in the center is a magnified version of what would normally be displayed in that area. So this exists. You can find it on your phone under accessibility, settings accessibility. Here's another accessibility setting that's built in on your phone and also many other platforms, inverted colors. So in this case, you find a switch and you click a button and it inverts all the colors. So for low vision people, the assumption is that inverting the colors, so white text over a dark background, will be easier to read than vice versa. So we have all these tools that exist, and they're quite common. As you can see, many people know about them. But strangely enough, we realized that nobody had actually done a study to see whether these tools were being used and how effective they were. So it's really surprising to me that nobody's done this before. So that's what we set out to do. So we wanted to know, are these tools being used and how effective are they? And specifically, in the context of a real-life activity. So this leads me to the central question of a study that I'm going to tell you about. And the question was, how do people with low vision perform a real-life daily activity? And in particular, we wanted to know what challenges do people face. So we wanted to better understand people with low vision and the patterns and challenges of their experiences. And then also we wanted to see what tools they use, both high-tech, like screen magnifiers, and low-tech, like handheld magnifiers, and how effective these tools were. So we needed to choose an activity, a daily activity. And the activity that we ended up choosing was finding a store and purchasing a specific product. And the reason that we chose this activity was because it included many sub-tasks that were very important for leading a productive and independent life today. So it included some wayfinding, both outdoors to find the store and then indoors within the store, finding a specific product, and then also buying the product, interacting with a cashier, dealing with money, and so on. So we conducted this study, and I'll explain the method that we used. So we recruited 11 participants. They had low vision. And we had 6 females and 5 males within the sample of 11. The average age was 41, and there was quite a huge age range between 20 and 68. And we recruited people with a variety of low vision conditions. So we didn't want to focus in on one particular type of low vision condition. This was the first study of this type, so we decided to recruit broadly, just look at low vision in general. And among our 11 participants, 7 had acquired their low vision either at birth or in childhood, and then 4 in adulthood. So this was a little interesting because I said earlier that most people acquire low vision later on in life, and the people that we were able to recruit had actually acquired their low vision earlier on. So you can see that we're dealing with a very heterogeneous population here. So the procedure for this study included 1 session, and each participant came to our lab, which is in a neighborhood in Manhattan called Chelsea, so it's a very dense area. So they came over. We started out with a semi-structured interview, so we asked them demographic questions, we asked them about their visual condition, and tried to understand some background about them. And then we did a contextual inquiry. So we gave them the task, and then we observed and interviewed them as they completed the task. Contextual inquiry is a core method in human-computer interaction. So this is where, as I was saying, a researcher observes a user study participant performing some task in its context, and you ask questions as you observe to really try and understand why the participant is performing the actions that they're performing, and to understand not just what the person is doing to complete the task, but also the thought process, the decision-making that goes behind it. So we told the participants to buy a very specific Tylenol product because this was part of the challenge. We wanted to see how they dealt with searching for a specific product. And we chose to focus on a particular Tylenol box because in this case, medication, it's something that you probably need to be fairly specific, fairly precise when you buy. Like there could actually be adverse consequences to getting the wrong kind of medication. So we gave participants very specific instructions before we set them out to go do the task, and we said, find a nearby store and where you can purchase Tylenol and find this specific Tylenol product. And this is a photo of the product. We showed them the box. It's Tylenol extra strength caplets, 500 milligrams, 100 count. And because we're in Manhattan, and it's a very dense area, there were actually about 3 or 4 pharmacies within walking distance around our starting point. So it wasn't trivial to find and choose a pharmacy to go to. So any questions about the method before I move on to the results?
Were participants allowed to walk into the pharmacy and ask somebody to get them the target object?
Great question. The question was, were the participants allowed to ask for help, basically, to walk into the pharmacy and ask somebody who worked at the pharmacy to get the product for them? Yes, the answer is yes. So we wanted to see what people would naturally do. So if they naturally ask for help, then that was fine. We wanted to see how well that worked for them and what that interaction was like. And later on, I might get to talking about the social aspects of our findings. There were actually some very interesting social interactions that we observed.
Why do you have to show how the box looks like? Because sometimes when you buy certain medication, you don't really know how the box looks like, right?
That's true. So the comment / question was, why did you show the Tylenol box? Because sometimes you don't have that information. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can look it up, right, these days on Google and look for it. I think we could have done it either way. It's a valid point. Okay, great. So anyway, we collected data as we followed our participants around. We audio recorded the sessions, and we took notes. We went back using qualitative coding techniques. We coded all of the transcripts and our notes, and then we came up with some findings. So I'll go over some of the findings, but for a more comprehensive discussion of what we found, you can check out our UBCom paper from this last fall, so from this year, UBCom 2016. So we organized our findings into the different subtasks that made up the overall task of finding a store and finding a product. So just as a review, so the subtasks involved were first finding a nearby store. So again, there were several stores within walking distance, and our participants had to figure out which store they would go to because this was an unfamiliar area to them. Then it was walking to the store, so actually getting there. Finding the right aisle in the store, so once you're in the store, actually navigating within it. And finally, finding the product on the shelf. And there was another task that I'm not going to cover unless there are questions, and that was purchasing the product. So let's start with finding the store. So the first thing that most of our participants did, which may or may not be too surprising to you all, is this. So they took out their phones and pulled up a map-based application, so Google Maps or something similar, to look for a nearby store. And it was interesting, we were interviewing people, we were talking to them as they were doing this, so we were getting a lot of information, not just about what they were doing at that moment, but also about their general experiences that related to that activity. And people felt that being able to do this, being able to use a map-based application, had completely changed their life. So in particular, one participant, Marie, this is actually a nickname because we keep the identity of our participants anonymous, who is 58. So she told us that using a map-based applications on her phone completely changed her life. She says that it's the first time in my life that I know where I am exactly. It's great. That's Safari Maps. But on the other hand, there were also many challenges that we observed. So there was this contradiction between people's enthusiasm about the product and the challenges that we observed. So people used their phone as they were walking to the pharmacy too. They were using the map-based application. They had looked up the location of the pharmacy, and then they started walking there. And they used some of the built-in magnification and color inversion features that I showed you earlier on their smartphones. And this is what we found. So here's a screenshot of Google Maps in this case, and the inverted colors feature is turned on. So what's the problem here? Colors, what? Right. Colors are not very contrasting. So we can see now the white text of the street names over the dark background very well. And this is what our low vision participants experienced too. So that was fantastic, and that was really what inverted colors was designed to do, to afford. On the other hand, the street layout, so the streets over the background, now have a very low contrast, and so it makes it really difficult to understand the street layout. So this was very challenging for our participants. Didn't work out too well. Here's another screenshot of Google Maps, and this time we have the screen magnifier on in the center, magnifying a part of the screen. So, so great. So now we see West 12th Street. It's large and clear. It's fantastic. What's the problem? What was that? Sorry. Right, you don't see what's around. So you're completely losing the context because there's a mismatch now between what's within this magnification window and what's around it. So again, great, we can read the label, but do I have any idea where I am and how that relates to the rest of my neighborhood? No. And having to deal with all of this information and negotiating all of these different technologies between the phone and the visual information around you was a challenge in itself. So one of our participants, Ethan, who's 31, described this general challenge. And he says, when you're outside and have low vision, you're already trying to watch where you're stepping and avoid obstacles. The last thing you need is to look at your map and become completely overwhelmed with the information. So as our participants walked to the store, only 2 used a cane, and 9 of them used their vision. So like Ethan was saying, there was a lot of visual information that he and many of our other participants were processing. So, and people had difficulty seeing, of course. So they had difficulty seeing street signs. They had difficulty seeing traffic lights and traffic signals. And they also had difficulty in very dark and very light environments. So what we noticed from all of this is that there was a lot of variation. And there was variation among the participants in terms of what they were able to see. But also, there was variation in what one given participant was able to see depending on the context. So, so participants were able to see a street sign if they stood very close to it, but if they stood farther away, they weren't able to see it. They could see some traffic signals, but not others if the lighting conditions weren't quite appropriate for them in one of them. So there was a lot of variation. So once participants got to the store, now there was the challenge of finding the correct aisle. So again, they walk into the store and they're faced with a lot of very dense visual information. And just like when they were outside, it was difficult for them to read and even to find signs within the store. So, so sometimes they could walk up to the sign and read it, but if they couldn't find the sign to begin with, if they couldn't see where it was, then they weren't able to do that. And people, again, used their vision extensively. So they used visual cues, like the shapes and colors of products, to understand which aisle they were in. So were they in the dairy aisle? Were they in the aisle that sold toilet paper? Or were they in the aisle that sold medicines? And the interesting thing about being indoors is that there were no tools that helped people with this process. So while outside people were using their phones a lot, inside they didn't really use anything. So finally, our participants found the correct aisle. And then, of course, they were faced with many products that looked very similar to one another. And then there was the task of finding the specific Tylenol product that we instructed them to find. So this was the most challenging subtask of all of the tasks that I've covered so far. Actually, this person might look familiar. She's sitting in the audience. So in this case, we observed that most people, to find the correct product, they had to pick up one product at a time, examine it very closely, either using a tool to help them read the details, like a magnifying glass, or just holding it up really close. And then once they determined whether it was the right product or not, they put it back. So this was a very laborious process. And while they did use some tools to help see the detail, there was no tool that helped them with this visual search task, with the task of scanning the shelves and identifying the product in a search task. So taking all those findings into account, we came up with some very compelling opportunities for improving low vision accessibility and for designing new accessibility innovations for people with low vision. So the first one is to design for low vision, not no vision. So all of our participants had some amount of functional vision, and more importantly, we found that they used this vision and they preferred to use it. So none of our participants used any technology that was designed for blind people. So throughout this talk so far, I've been talking a lot about very visual technologies and visual strategies. And unfortunately, our community right now is only focused on designing audio-based or tactile-based technologies that are really designed for people with no vision. The second opportunity is to address specific real-world tasks. So in examining all these different subtasks, we noticed that people had different needs in these different tasks, and also in different contexts, whether it was outdoors or indoors, depending on the lighting conditions, depending on the person's visual condition. And these generic enhancements like magnification and color inversion really didn't work in many of those cases. The third opportunity was to design for different visual abilities. So again, relating to the last one, there was not only a difference among people, but also for one person. There was a huge difference in what they could see depending on the application that they were using, whether it was a map-based application, whether they were trying to read something, depending on the lighting conditions, depending on whether they were in or outdoors, and so on and so forth. So that's something that needs to be taken into account. And then finally, we saw that there was a huge need to improve the smartphone accessibility tools. So we saw that color inversion and magnification were just problematic in certain situations for certain applications. So clearly there's a need to improve those tools as well. So this led us to a new approach in accessibility. And I call this approach context-based visual cues. So we want to design, and we are designing, applications that have context-based visual cues for people with low vision to support them in daily activities. So we're designing visual feedback that take into account the user's context, the task they're trying to complete, their visual condition, and also the environment that they're in, to support people in these important daily activities that help them be productive and independent. So before I move on, are there any questions?
So we were wondering whether people are tending to now rely on things like Amazon's delivery service instead of actually going out to the store.
Yeah.
I mean, now that these things are available.
Great question. So the question was, are people relying on Amazon's delivery service? And actually, in New York, there are like a million other delivery services available. So are people relying on those instead of actually going out to the store? So we had this question too. And it's hard to say because we had such a small sample and it wasn't necessarily representative. But there's certainly a desire to have the same opportunities as sighted people do, right? So even if that option is available, I still think it's very important to enable people to go to the store if they choose to. Another thing related to that is that for older adults who are losing their vision, one of the main problems is isolation, social isolation. People end up not leaving their homes. So it is actually incredibly important to support people in going out in their communities and engaging with local businesses and doing other outdoor activities. Any other questions? No questions. Okay. So the first application of this kind that we designed following this new approach is called QC. And QC explores visual cues for people with low vision to facilitate a visual search task, specifically in the context of product search. Oh, and I should also mention, this is work that was done by my PhD student, Yuhong Zhao, who led the project, my former postdoc, Sarit Shapiro, another former student, Jonathan Knighton, and it was presented at UBComp 2016. So the subtask that was the most challenging in the study that I mentioned was this product search task. So that's why, and there were also no adequate tools to support it. So that's why this was the task that we decided to tackle first with QC. So the approach that we took with QC was to augment people's vision directly with visual cues. So the way that we did this was with head-mounted displays, with smart glasses. So we can see a trend now that smart glasses are getting more and more popular. More and more platforms are entering the marketplace. And so we envision that in the next 5 to 10 years, everybody will be wearing glasses with some instrumentation on them, cameras and displays that can augment people's vision. So this is an emerging platform that's very exciting to us, and we think it makes a lot of sense to explore this opportunities for this platform for low vision. So we also wanted to leverage computer vision technology to recognize products with computer vision. So this is an area in computer vision that's quite well developed. There's been a lot of research on product recognition in the last decade or so. So we want to leverage this. And then the challenge becomes, after we've used computer vision to recognize a specified product, the challenge here was really to design visual cues that can leverage a person's vision, even though they have low vision, can leverage their vision and help them find the product. So direct their attention to the product and help them find it in this visual search task. So we designed 5 visual cues that were based on different visual conditions and also cognitive psychology theories. So this is a mock grocery store shelf that we set up in our lab. And this is the first visual cue. It's called guideline. So here we see a red line that spans from the center of the display to the center of the product that was identified with the computer vision algorithms. This is spotlight. This is the second cue. So here we turned the background into grayscale, and the product that we identified is in color. This is flash. So here we put a frame around the product, and we change it from black to white. It's flashing. And this is movement. So here the product is rotating back and forth. And you probably, and one more cue, this is sun rays. So with sun rays, we have 8 lines that start at different points in the periphery of the screen, and they converge at the product. So in this case, even if you have a limited field of view, you can probably find one of the lines, and it'll direct you towards the product. So we tried to think of different types of visual conditions that people have, and different methods from cognitive psychology, like flash onset, that are used to attract people's attention. We also let people customize the cues so they could combine them. So this is an example of a combination. So we have the sun rays, the lines that start at the periphery and converge at the product, and then also spotlight. So the background around the product is in grayscale. And you can, of course, create any combination that you would like. And you might have also noticed that the product is a little bigger than all the others, and that's because we also magnified it slightly and increased the contrast to help people verify. So once they found the product, they could see it a little better to make sure to use their vision and to actually make sure that it was the product that they were looking for. So we're using both the computer vision and the user's vision to try and create a smooth visual experience for the user. So let me show you a video of how this works. So my student, Yuhang Zhao, is going to demonstrate reaching for a product, and you'll be able to see what she sees through the head-mounted display. This is playing. There we go. So this is what she sees over here, and you can see the cue is over the product, around the product. Here's another cue. So she sees it, and she's reaching for the product. Questions?
How do you tell the software what to look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do you tell the software what to look for? We haven't tackled the input part of this yet, so that's one of our future steps. So for now, it's something that Yu Hong, my student, would just program into her prototype.
One more question.
Okay.
Can you say a little bit about the role of customization? For example, somebody who's colorblind couldn't use some aspects of this, or maybe somebody with epilepsy would be bothered by the flashing and so forth.
Right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the study. So I'm going to talk about how people customized the system very soon. Okay, great. All right. So we evaluated QC with 12 low vision participants. And again, as we did in the first study that I talked about, we recruited people with a variety of low vision conditions. So our only requirement was that people had low vision. We used this mock grocery store shelf here that we set up in one of our conference rooms. And we decided to factor out the computer vision task. So we didn't want any errors in the computer vision to interfere, because what we were really interested in evaluating were the visual cues themselves. And again, their design and effectiveness for different visual conditions. So what we did was we tagged the products with these little codes here, and we used a computer vision algorithm that was able to detect those tags with high accuracy. And we hacked together this prototype of a video see-through head-mounted display. So it's an Oculus with a webcam. So the effect is that it's very similar to what you would get from Google Cardboard. So you can see, so what happens is the camera captures the surroundings, and then we can process that video and then present it to the user in front of their eyes. And we're by no means suggesting that people should walk around with this device. This was really just a prototype. And we're investigating, again, like I was saying, we're investigating this idea of designing visual cues for low vision. And we believe that eventually we'll be able to deploy this on mainstream smart glasses. So in the study, in the procedure, it was one session, and there were two main things that we investigated. So the first thing we wanted to assess was the effectiveness of the different cues. So we asked participants to try out each of the 5 cues and to find specified products with them, and then just to try out the base enhancement. So who knows? Maybe we don't even need cues to begin with. Maybe we can just use magnification to highlight the product. And then we asked them to also customize the cue so that they could create their preferred cue. And then the second thing that we did was we wanted to see how, in quantitative terms, how QC helped them with a product search task compared to their best corrected vision. So compared to their vision with contacts or glasses. Best case scenario. So first I'll talk about, going back to the question earlier, customization. So we found that people had very different preferences for the visual cues. So when we asked them to assess the different cues and find products with them, and then we asked them to create their combination, their favorite cue, and combine from the different cues. So here we see each column in this table represents a participant, and then each row stands for the different cue. So people had very different preferences, and you can see that, let's see, sun rays was pretty popular. Nobody chose movement, which was kind of interesting. Flash people liked quite a bit, and spotlight. But there were very individual preferences. The other thing to note is that everyone found the cues helpful. So magnification, magnifying the product in itself, was not enough to help direct people's attention to it. Because magnification only helps you see details. It doesn't help attract your attention to a product. It doesn't make a particular target more visible. Then when we asked people to perform a product search task with QC and with their best corrected vision, we found really good results. So we found that QC by far outperformed best correction. So in terms of time to find the product, with best correction, so with glasses or contacts, it took people an average of about 27 seconds to find a product. So it took them nearly half a minute to find a specified product on that mock grocery store shelf. And then with QC, it took them about 15 seconds. So the time was cut almost in half, which was a huge win. In terms,
What's the performance of normal person?
Of normal what?
Normal vision person.
Of sighted people? I'd imagine, we didn't measure it, but I mean, it's about like a second at most, right? Because we had a shelf that was this big and this high. It wasn't very large. And participants were standing 1 meter away. So you can imagine if you have typical vision, it really doesn't take very long.
Did you consider how people might get better at the task over time as they become more familiar with the items on the shelf?
That's a very good question. Did we consider how people would get better at the task over time, so over the trials throughout the study, because they get familiar with the location of items on the shelf? We changed the order of the items every time.
And the conditions?
And the what?
The order of the conditions as well?
Oh, yeah, we counterbalanced the conditions. Yeah, you're welcome to read the paper to see the details, but we definitely thought about all those cases. Okay, and so in terms of accuracy, so QC had a win here as well. So there weren't too many mistakes that were made. Only a handful of mistakes were made with best correction, but with QC, everyone got the right target every single time. So the Qs were very effective at directing them to the right product. So to summarize, so we found that the visual cues were very effective for participants, and there was a lot of variety in which cues people preferred. So we didn't see any obvious trends. We did have a small number of participants, but we didn't see any obvious trends across different visual conditions. It was very individual which cues participants preferred. But they all preferred the cues over just magnification. Because again, magnification helps you see details. It doesn't help with a visual search task. And finally, QC also changed people's behavior. So now they were able to behave more like a sighted person, and that they would stand about 1 meter away from the shelf, kind of glance around, and then reach for the product, as opposed to having to pick up every single product and examine it individually. So we're excited about this new approach, and we want to apply it to other daily activities as well. So one of the activities that we also examined in our study was wayfinding. So we want to use context-based visual cues to help people find and read street signs. So for example, here there's a red arrow pointing to a street sign that says 14th Street. Another application is helping people find their friends, so identify faces. For example, when you're walking down the street and you're looking for a friend, it can be really hard to identify your friend in a crowd. So we want to add visual cues to help people find certain other people. And again, this is leveraging computer vision technology that's already quite good. This could also be recognizing people can also be very helpful for general awareness. You walk into a conference room. There are many use cases in which recognizing people and helping and giving you visual cues to help you know who's around you can be very important for both social and also productivity reasons. There are many other applications for visual search. So I'm sure that now that you've thought a little bit more about visual search, you'll find yourself visually searching for many things in your lives. So in summary, I just wanted to go over the topics and the contributions that I've discussed. So I talked about low vision and how it's an extremely important and pervasive disability, but it's been very understudied in human-computer interaction and accessibility. I discussed a study that we did to understand people with low vision's patterns and challenges when performing the daily activity of finding a store and finding a product. And then I presented our new approach to low vision accessibility using context-based visual cues to help people perform specific tasks. And I presented QC, which was one application for a head-mounted display that followed this new approach that significantly helped people find products on a grocery store shelf. So I'll look forward to speaking to everyone more and hearing your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, first question here.
I'm wondering if it's a worthwhile distinction, or if there's a distinction in the community between sort of the elderly and not elderly for low vision, both because of other, differences in needs and abilities, and also because someone who has been low vision for most of his or her life, as opposed to becoming low vision, might interact, differently.
Yeah. So the question is there a difference between older people who are losing their sight and acquire low vision versus people who have had low vision since earlier on in their life? And that's absolutely, I'm sure there is, and it's a very good point. And I think it's something that's incredibly important to study. So I hope to study that, older adults with vision loss. Again, we're just starting out, so there's a whole lot here to look at. And by the way, low vision in older adults has been linked with social isolation, depression, chronic illness. It's something that's very difficult for older adults to deal with, and a lot of people just aren't aware that there are tools out there that can help them see. So low vision, it's not just an invisible disability in the sense that you can't always tell that a person has low vision. It's also invisible in a sense that there's very little public awareness about what low vision is, which is a huge problem.
More questions? Yeah, back in the back.
I was curious, how much of this do you think applies to low vision people in particular, or how much to sighted people also? And I was thinking about the example that you had from your contextual inquiry, where there was the woman who said that with using, I think, Safari maps, this is the first time that she can actually see where she is.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's specific to low vision, or is that just, by virtue of having maps on our phones now, like everyone knows where they are for the first time?
Right. Great question. So the question is how much of this applies to low vision specifically versus to sighted people? And it's interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of the comments that we get, like in reviews for papers, is, well, this isn't specific to low vision, everybody experiences this. And that's true with any disability or any situation that we're studying, right? There's always a spectrum. And with low vision, there's a range of abilities. There are some people who have a lot more sight and some people who have less sight. So a lot of people will experience the same challenges that sighted people do, but they experience them to a different degree. So for a sighted person, for example, like poor GPS signal was something that came up in our study. So having a bad GPS signal on your phone could be kind of annoying for a sighted person, because you're trying to localize yourself with your phone on the map, and GPS signal is poor, so you can't quite figure it out. But okay, then you look up and you look at the street signs and you figure it out. But for a low vision person, you don't have that workaround. So you're much more reliant on certain things. And so it becomes, the challenges are exacerbated by the fact that the workarounds can be a lot more difficult or not possible. And by the way, that's also one of the reasons that doing this work is so exciting, because by fixing these problems, you might make a small difference to a sighted person, but you make a huge difference to a low vision person. I mean, that's true for any accessibility work.
I have a question. I was wondering, for the people in the first study that were older and losing their vision, in your demographic study of them, did they have any orientation and mobility training, which is sort of standard, or were they sort of on their own, or does that O&M training make a difference?
Great question. So I think that, so low vision is challenging to study in many ways, and one of the reasons it's challenging is because there isn't a cohesive community. And many people with low vision don't identify as having a disability. So when we recruit people, we tend, and this is a bias of recruitment, we tend to reach the people who do consider themselves part of a disability community, who may have gotten the training, who sought it out. But many people out there don't. And some of the people who come to our studies haven't. So it's a lot less likely that a low vision person would have gotten training, whether it's orientation and mobility training or whether it's training on how to use their device, than a blind person. And that, I think, adds this interesting design challenge on how to make the technology discoverable and learnable.
Also, it seems to be a challenge also for doing a good study to find the people that are not, do not identify themselves as disabled who actually are disabled.
Yes, yes. I mean, sampling. This is a huge problem in human-computer interaction in general. We don't get representative samples of people. Yeah.
Any more questions? Well, let's thank Shiri one last time.